Welcome to the deep dive. We got some excerpts from an article, and wow, they were fascinating.
Yeah, definitely intriguing.
Right. The title was DeepSeek and the Folly of Neoliberal AI, How the Global South Out-Innovated Silicon Valley.
So right off the bat, it's kind of provocative.
Totally. And that's why we knew we had to do a deep dive on this.
I'm excited to dig in.
This article basically dives into how a Chinese AI company called DeepSeek just kind of came out of nowhere and totally shook up the AI world. And
It really does challenge a lot of the assumptions about, where innovation comes from and who are the major players.
Absolutely. The article highlights this amazing thing DeepSeek did. They developed these AI models that are right up there with the ones from those big names like OpenAI and Google DeepMind.
Yeah, it's like they're going head to head with the giants.
Totally a David versus Goliath situation. But here's the thing. They did all this with way fewer resources. They didn't have that easy access to all the fancy hardware, like the NVIDIA chips and stuff.
Right. And of course, not the insane amount of funding that Silicon Valley companies just swim in.
Exactly. So it's how did they manage to pull this off? What was their secret weapon or something?
Well, the article kind of digs into how DeepSeek approached knowledge and problem solving in a totally different way. They were all about collaboration,
Yeah.
encouraging their engineers to share all their code and solutions on these internal platforms.
So instead of everyone being all secretive and competitive, they're just sharing everything.
Yeah, it's a real contrast to how a lot of Western companies operate, where knowledge is like this closely guarded treasure.
Fascinating. But doesn't that seem kind of risky? Wouldn't they worry about their work being copied or even stolen?
That's a great question. And the article does touch on those potential downsides. But the thing is, this radical transparency actually helped them move faster?
Oh, I see. So by being open about problems, they could address them quicker.
Exactly. They were able to iterate and improve their models way faster because everyone was on the same page.
It's like a hive mind, but for AI development. So what kind of AI models are we talking about here? Did they do stuff like making images or writing code like those other companies?
Well, DeepSeek actually focused on things that needed less data but used really clever algorithms.
Oh, interesting. So they found a way to work around their hardware limitations.
Exactly. One example is they were amazing at natural language processing, but for languages that don't have tons of data.
Wow. So languages spoken by smaller groups of people?
Yeah. They found ways to make AI work for those languages, which is pretty incredible.
That's awesome. It's like they're making AI accessible to everyone. So it sounds like it's not just about the money then. What else makes DeepSeek stand out from those Silicon Valley companies?
Well, the article also talks about how DeepSeek had this really long-term vision.
So they weren't just trying to make a quick buck with the next trendy app.
Nope. They were thinking about the bigger picture and putting a lot of energy into fundamental research and even exploring AI approaches that weren't very mainstream.
So they were willing to take risks and explore uncharted territory.
Exactly. And that long-term vision combined with their super collaborative and efficient approach helped them make some serious progress in AI, even surpassing those big Western companies in some areas.
That's amazing. So this isn't just a one-off story about DeepSeek, right? The article is using them as an example of a much bigger trend of the global south really shaking things up in the tech world.
Right. Think about the rise of companies like TikTok and Huawei. They faced a lot of pushback from the global north, even though they were incredibly successful.
Yeah, it's like they were seen as a threat instead of an opportunity to learn and grow.
The article calls it the global north's playbook for suppressing innovation it can't control. Instead of embracing new ideas, it's like they resort to things like sanctions or trying to control the narrative around these companies.
It sounds like instead of adapting, they just double down on trying to maintain control.
That seems to be the pattern. There's this fear of the balance of power shifting away from the established players.
So let's talk about what makes DeepSeek's approach so effective. They're doing things completely different from the traditional Silicon Valley model, right?
Yeah, they're basically flipping the script. And it's not just about rejecting the old ways, but embracing a new set of values. They're all about cooperation over competition, and they prove that you can be super efficient without all those crazy resources.
And what about the intellectual property stuff? Didn't you say they were really open with their work?
Yeah, they prioritize open problem solving over those restrictive IP constraints. It allows for more collaboration and innovation.
It sounds like they're creating a whole new ecosystem for developing AI, one that's all about sharing knowledge and making progress together.
And the results are pretty convincing. They're achieving breakthroughs with way fewer resources. It makes you wonder if there's a better way to do things, a more sustainable path to innovation.
It's like they're presenting an alternative vision for what AI could be. one that's not all about profit and power.
Absolutely. And that's what makes their story so compelling.
This is where things get even more interesting. The article compares DeepSeek to this concept of metristic civilizations.
Ah, yes. Those ancient societies that were structured around cooperation, nurturing communal living, you know,
Yeah.
quite a contrast to those hierarchical, patriarchal structures.
So how does a modern tech company like DeepSeek relate to all of that?
Well, the article argues that DeepSeek's emphasis on collaboration and shared knowledge has echoes of those values found in those ancient societies.
Okay, wow, that's a pretty big leap. So are they saying that DeepSeek is trying to bring back ancient ways of thinking?
Not literally, of course, but it's suggesting that maybe this new model of progress that DeepSeek is using is actually rooted in these very old ideas about community and knowledge sharing.
Okay, so where does the article go from there?
Well, it suggests that just like those ancient societies were often wiped out or absorbed by conquest, the global north might try to do the same with DeepSeek.
So through suppression or maybe trying to take control of their work.
Yeah, it's a pretty bold claim, but it makes you think about the power dynamics involved here.
It's like DeepSeek is seen as this threat to the established order, and those in power won't give up their control easily.
It definitely has implications far beyond just the world of technology.
Right. It challenges how we think about progress and innovation on a societal level.
Exactly. DeepSeek is basically saying there might be a different way, a more collaborative and equitable path to progress.
This is all super fascinating, and we're just scratching the surface. When we come back, we'll dive even deeper into DeepSeek's open source approach and explore what it all means for the future of AI. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Before the break, we were talking about how the global north often reacts to innovation from the global south, and it just makes you think.
It really does.
Like, what if they'd actually learned from those earlier examples like TikTok and Huawei? Would we even be having this whole conversation about DeepSeek right now?
It's a really interesting question. Maybe if there had been more of an open mind, more willingness to collaborate with companies outside of those traditional tech hubs, things could be so different.
Instead, it seems like those companies were immediately seen as a threat, something to be controlled.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to see it. It makes you wonder what could have happened if all that energy and resources spent on trying to control them had gone towards working together and sharing knowledge instead.
It feels like a huge missed opportunity, especially because the article makes it clear that DeepSeek's success wasn't just luck or good timing.
Exactly. It's about a completely different way of thinking about innovation.
They were challenging the very foundation of the traditional model, right?
Right. They're all about cooperation instead of competition valuing efficiency over excess, and they embrace open problem solving instead of getting all hung up on restrictive intellectual property rules. It's not just a small change, it's a complete overhaul.
And they've got the results to prove it. Developing those AI models that rival Silicon Valley, but with a fraction of the resources.
It makes you question that whole idea of just throwing money at a problem, which seems to be the default in the global north.
It really highlights the power of ingenuity and resourcefulness.
Right. They had to think outside the box, be more creative because they didn't have unlimited resources.
And that brings us to one of the most fascinating parts of DeepSeek, their open source approach.
It's a stark contrast to those closed proprietary models you see with a lot of Western AI companies.
Yeah, where secrecy is like the norm.
Think about OpenAI or Google DeepMind. They keep their models locked down tight. But DeepSeek went the opposite direction, making their code and architecture available to anyone.
So anyone with the knowledge can just download it, modify it, train it on their own data.
That's the idea. It's like they're democratizing AI, unlocking its potential for everyone.
Imagine if more companies did that. The possibilities are mind-blowing.
The article argues that this open source approach could be game-changing, especially when it comes to things like bias in AI.
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
They specifically talk about how DeepSeek's models could be trained on data that challenges those harmful narratives about neurodiversity.
So it could be used to make AI systems that are more inclusive and equitable.
Exactly. And it opens up so many new applications and innovations. Imagine communities all over the world, even those without a lot of resources, being able to use AI to solve their own unique problems.
That's a pretty amazing thought. But the article also mentions that there are risks involved, right?
Of course. With that level of openness, there's always the potential for misuse.
So how do they address that?
Well, it's a challenge that DeepSeek and the whole open source AI community are grappling with. But the article suggests that the benefits outweigh the risks.
Because by making things more transparent and encouraging collaboration, they can actually reduce those risks.
Right. They're basically putting their faith in the collective wisdom of the community to guide the development and use of AI in a responsible way.
A bold move. But then we come back to that whole issue of power dynamics.
Right. Even with good intentions, can DeepSeek really stay independent?
Given the global North's history of squashing anything that challenges its dominance,
Exactly. It's the big question. The article is kind of pessimistic, suggesting that they might try to erase DeepSeek or discredit them or even try to co-opt their work and take control.
it paints a pretty grim picture.
It does, but it also acknowledges that DeepSeek's story is still being written. It's too early to know how it'll all end.
It feels like a turning point, not just for DeepSeek, but for AI as a whole.
Will we see a shift towards a more collaborative approach to technology, or will the old power structures hold on?
I'm curious about how DeepSeek is viewed within China,
That's a great point. The article doesn't really touch on that.
because their whole approach seems to go against that typical narrative of top-down control and state-led innovation that we often hear about when it comes to China.
Right. It would be really interesting to know how they fit into the bigger picture of Chinese tech and innovation. Are they seen as a rebel, a disruptor, something else entirely? It's a question worth exploring.
I think that's a really important observation. We tend to look at things through a very specific lens, shaped by our own preconceived notions and biases.
And DeepSeek's story forces us to step outside of that and consider different perspectives.
Especially when we're talking about something as powerful as AI, we need to be having these conversations, exploring all the different viewpoints, and thinking critically about what's shaping the future of technology. Before we wrap up this deep dive, let's go back to that idea of mutualistic civilizations and how it relates to DeepSeek. It's definitely a thought-provoking concept. What are your thoughts on it?
It's definitely an interesting comparison. Whether it's completely accurate is up for debate, but it raises some good questions about how we view progress and innovation. Are we really inventing something totally new? Or are we just rediscovering ways of thinking and being that have been lost or suppressed over time?
So maybe our current model of innovation, with its emphasis on competition and individual achievement, is actually moving away from a more natural, collaborative way of being.
And perhaps DeepSeek, with its focus on shared knowledge and collective progress, is pointing us back towards a more sustainable and equitable path.
It's a really powerful idea, and one worth thinking about as we continue to explore DeepSeek's story. In the final part of our deep dive, we'll discuss the broader societal implications of their work and consider what their success might mean for the future of innovation as a whole. Welcome back to the deep dive. So we've talked a lot about DeepSeek and their totally different approach to AI. But before we wrap things up, I want to shift gears a bit
Okay.
and talk about what this all means for the average person, someone who's not a coder or an AI expert. Why should they care about DeepSeek's story?
That's a great question, and I think there are a few reasons why DeepSeek's journey matters to everyone regardless of their technical background.
Okay, lay it on me.
First, it really shows the power of challenging those assumptions. We often just accept things the way they are without questioning if there's a better way.
Right, it gets stuck in those old ways of thinking.
Exactly. But DeepSeek reminds us that there are always other options, different ways to approach problems and find success, and that applies to so much more than just AI.
It's a message that resonates in so many areas of life.
Absolutely. The second thing is DeepSeek's story emphasizes how important collaboration and open knowledge sharing are. In a world where everyone is trying to hoard information and make a profit off of it, their commitment to open source principles is really refreshing.
Yeah, it's like they're bucking the trend.
They're proving that we can achieve so much more when we work together and share our knowledge and resources instead of constantly competing. It's like that old saying, 2 heads are better than 1.
And that idea is especially important when we talk about AI because it has the potential to affect every aspect of our lives, right?
Absolutely. So the question is, do we want a few powerful corporations controlling AI development, or do we want a more open and democratic process where everyone has a voice? DeepSeek's story really makes us confront that.
It's a choice we have to make as a society. And DeepSeek is offering a pretty compelling alternative, showing that open collaboration can actually lead to some amazing advancements.
Right. And the third point, which might be the most important, is that DeepSeek's success makes us question if the global North's model of innovation is really sustainable in the long run.
Right.
their dependence on huge amounts of funding, cutthroat competition, and trying to control everything. It seems like they might be hitting a wall,
Well, DeepSeek is showing that there's another way.
a way that values efficiency and resourcefulness and has a long-term vision.
In a world facing all these huge problems like climate change and inequality, we need to be exploring every possible solution, right?
Absolutely. DeepSeek shows us that innovation can come from unexpected places and that sometimes doing more with less can be the key. They're almost like a blueprint for a more sustainable, more equitable, and ultimately more effective way to progress.
It's definitely a vision worth considering.
Yeah.
But there are still challenges ahead. Can DeepSeek really stand up to those powerful forces that might try to shut them down? And can their model really work on a global scale?
Those are the million-dollar questions. Their story isn't over yet, but even if they don't achieve everything they set out to do, they've already made a huge impact.
They've shaken things up, inspired others to think differently, and shown the world that a different path is possible.
And that's the most important thing. Their story is a reminder that we have choices. We can shape the future of technology, and even a small group of people with a bold vision can change the world.
It's a really hopeful message. And who knows, maybe DeepSeek's journey will inspire others to explore new ideas, collaborate with each other, and challenge the status quo in their own way.
I hope so.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the amazing world of DeepSeek. We hope you've gained some new insights into innovation and the power of questioning assumptions. And hey, maybe you'll even be inspired to go out there and shake things up a bit yourself.
That would be awesome.